We're here again at Moon's Rare Books with Reid Moon, and he's going to talk to us about another special object from church history that he has. This is a 1830 edition of the Book of Mormon, but this one is really, really special to our history. Tell us a little bit about who owned this and where it comes from.
So the first edition Book of Mormon came off the press March 26, 1830, and less than 2 weeks later, the church is restored. And then after that, Joseph tells his younger brother Samuel to go out and to spread the gospel and the message that's in this book. And so Samuel fills up his knapsack with what would be first edition copies of the Book of Mormon. And that first day he goes out, I believe he only made it to about 4 homes, but they were spread out, and he was rejected, goes to an inn to spend the night, and the innkeeper says, what are you doing? And he takes that as a missionary opportunity to say, well, I'm out sharing the message in this book that my brother translated from plates of gold he found buried in the ground. And the innkeeper actually didn't take that too well. He said, you are a liar. And he physically kicked him out of the inn. Well, that's Samuel. It's late at night. It's too far to go to the next town. He's walking down the road, sees an apple tree, and that's where he decides to spend the night. He begins to lay down. The ground is damp, but he's probably too tired to move on. That's the first day of the first missionary, rejected by everybody, sleeping under an apple tree.
Yeah.
But what he has in his knapsack are these copies of the Book of Mormon, and like most missionaries, they had good days, they had bad days. A few weeks later, he goes to the Tomlinson Inn, and he sees a man sitting by himself, and he walks over to this man and says, "Sir, I have a book you should read." And the man said, "Pray tell, what book would that be?" And he says, "It's the Book of Mormon, but most people are calling it the Golden Bible." And when he said Golden Bible, that man knew what he was talking about and wanted a copy, and Samuel handed him a copy. He looked at it and handed it back to Samuel, and Samuel hadn't introduced himself yet, and he says, "And what is your name?" And he said, "Samuel H. Smith." And he goes, "Wait, did I see your name in the back?" And it's like, "Yes, I'm one of the witnesses." Well, this man, whose name was Phineas, his plan was to take the book, read it, and mark all the errors. He was a lay preacher, and that was his plan. And so he purchased a copy, and the going price at the time was $1.25 for a Book of Mormon. And that was one way Samuel was able to support himself. But that man took that book home and read it in a week. And it was confusing to him. He was expecting to find a lot of places where this disagreed with the Bible, but he read it a second time in 2 weeks. So in 2 weeks, he went through 588 pages. So he read almost 1,100 plus pages in 2 weeks and decided that it was true. And then that's and that man's name was Phineas Young, the older brother of Brigham Young. And these books were circulated around. And that first mission that Samuel maybe thought was a failure ended up bringing in Brigham Young and Brigham Young's dear friend, Heber C. Kimball. We know from Samuel Smith's writings that he would often tell people and open his copy of the Book of Mormon and show people, well, and this is how we know it's his copy, it has his book plate, which was a common way of marking books, Samuel H. Smith. The book plate was actually printed in Kirtland on the press there. I've also seen first edition copies of W.W. Phelps. His book plate is printed on the Kirtland press. And another that I don't recall right now. But Samuel took pride in showing that he was one of the witnesses. And if you open his copy, he has starred and underlined his name to make it easy for people to see when he said, "Look, I am one of the witnesses. That is me. I am Samuel H. Smith, and my brother translated this book by the gift and power of God." This book is well worn. I would almost be disappointed. He went on several missions. I would be disappointed if it was brand new, but the first missionary, his copy of the Book of Mormon is just one of those priceless artifacts from early church history. And I know some of you are probably thinking, why am I not using white gloves? Well, Smithsonian, Library of Congress have all indicated that if clean, dry hands are a safer way to handle books. White gloves tend to be slippery, and it's very hard. And I've tried to turn pages, and you end up damaging pages. And so, but I tell people if they bring that up, I do have clean hands and a pure heart. So
let me add a little bit to this story too. One of the great things about Samuel is that he is enthusiastic. He is, of all the Smith brothers, visiting Joseph during the translation process of the Book of Mormon. So right after Joseph Smith has lost the manuscript of the Book of Mormon, and he's really discouraged, Samuel and Joseph Sr. come to visit him. And at that time, the revelation that's now section 4 in the Doctrine and Covenants is received for Joseph Smith Sr. After the church is organized, like Reid said, Samuel takes a knapsack full of these and goes out on his mission. And one thing that we found, and I want to mention this so that we highlight the role of women in the restoration, is that one person that he was able to place a copy with was John P. Green, this minister who basically said, I don't want it, but I'll see if anybody else wants it. I'll hang on to a copy and let you know. Samuel isn't successful in his first contact with them, but he continues to meet with the Green family. And when he's meeting with Rhoda Green, who's John's wife, he offers her a copy of the Book of Mormon, and she bursts into tears. And she asks Samuel if he'll kneel down and pray with her, and they do, and they both have this immense spiritual experience. Well, within a year, John and Rhoda both agree to be baptized and join the church, and Rhoda's maiden name is Young. She's the sister of Phineas Young, who also, like you mentioned, has a copy of the Book of Mormon and reads it, and then they eventually hand their copy to Brigham Young, who becomes the second president of the church. And Phineas Young later on, we should mention Samuel passes away in 1844, a month after Joseph and Hiram do. He passes away from, he just had, some people think that Samuel, who visited his brothers in Carthage jail and had to ride low in the saddle because he was being pursued by mobs, may have suffered internal injuries from the saddle horn. For whatever reason, he gets sick and he passes away about a month after Joseph and Hiram. But the very first traditionally recognized missionary in the church is Samuel Harrison Smith, and that is his testimony right here in the back of the Book of Mormon as one of the 8 witnesses. In fact, Phineas Young later on tells the story of Samuel Smith, and I want to read what Phineas Young said. He said this, Phineas said, I recall meeting with Samuel, and I pointed out his name on the page recognizing the 8 witnesses. In response to this inquiry, Samuel responded, yes, I know the book to be a revelation from God, translated by the gift and power of the Holy Ghost, and that my brother, Joseph Smith Jr., is a prophet, seer, and revelator. So it doesn't seem like he's a very successful missionary at first, but he does manage to start the process that brings the Young family into the church, and that really changes things for us and sends us down a different direction.
Well, and I don't think a lot of people know the full story of Samuel. We know a lot more about Hiram and Joseph, but Samuel was always there in the background being of great help to his brother, both brothers.
Yeah, and it feels like during the translation process, Samuel and Hiram are the two that are constantly shuttling back and forth between Palmyra and Harmony. In fact, one thing we forgot to mention explicitly earlier was that Samuel shows up in Harmony, Pennsylvania, where Joseph Smith and Oliver are translating just after John the Baptist gives them the Aaronic priesthood. And Samuel asks to be baptized now that they have the priesthood. He's one of the very first people to be baptized in this dispensation.
Isn't he the first after Joseph and Oliver?
I believe so, yeah. After Joseph and Oliver baptize each other.
Well, and what I like about that is the first convert, other than Joseph, becomes the first missionary.
Yeah, and that's kind of neat, isn't it? A story that's still told today all over the world, that a convert gains their witness of the truth and then they want to go out and share it with other people. And Samuel really is that first person to do those things. So he needs a little bit more recognition than he gets, because he never held a high leadership position within the church, but he's always there and always supporting his brothers to the very end.